Well, get on down here in this bayou and get you some gumbo and etouffee with America's sweetest and swampiest podcast, the Pod People. I'm a big old alligator just ready to chomp and eat some Mardi Gras beads.
I'm drunk and I'm stupid. Please let me sleep. I'm Ben Sheets.
Hi, and I'm the savory man, Cleveland Mosier, bringing you all the salty treats.
Salts for the salty.
Salts for the salts for the salty. That's right.
Well, this is our final year of the sequel selection for 2022. This was Ben's pick. We're going to be talking about Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, which is the follow-up to 1992's, I believe, Candyman, directed by Bernard Rose. This one was not directed by Bernard Rose. It was directed by Bill Condon, who later went on to direct Twilight Breaking Dawn Part 1 and 2. And also that...
you get that paycheck, baby.
Yeah, and also that 2015 elderly Sherlock Holmes movie starring Ian McKellen that came and went and that nobody remembers.
I don't remember it at all.
I remember the trailers and I totally forgot about it. I never saw it until I was looking at Bill Condon's filmography and I was like, oh yeah, I remember that movie was a thing.
I'd have to see a trailer to... Or I definitely didn't see it.
Well, it's Sherlock Holmes, but with Ian McKellen, and he's old.
Yeah.
I think that's all anybody
Sherlock
needs
Holmes,
to know.
but it's a thriller because you're scared he's going to break a hip.
Yes.
See.
But,
oh, wait, isn't that one that does, like, some unreliable narrator?
I don't know. I didn't see it.
I don't know, yeah.
I didn't see it. But I did see Candyman, Farewell to the Flesh, which is basically just Candyman again, but what if it was in New Orleans, and what if all the actors were really bad?
Yeah. And what if it was, like, more of a traditional slasher?
Yeah.
As well.
What if it took away a lot of the things that make the Candyman character and mythos cool, and did things a lot more literally and generically and in New Orleans?
Literal is the word of the day on this one,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, I'll be honest, for the most part, I kind of love that about it. Not because it's good.
Yeah, it's because it's not.
But I did think it was fun, and I was pretty regularly shouting throughout the movie, whether happy or not, and I tend to appreciate that in a film.
Yeah.
I was feeling strong emotions throughout.
It's,
and that's all right.
It's a movie that does make you react to it,
Yeah.
for better or
And
for
movies
worse,
should.
which I guess is better than it being boring slop.
Yeah.
And,
yeah,
well,
100%.
Yeah, minus the slop part, which it would be a little unkind to the remake. I do think the remake is kind of boring. And one thing I can give this movie over the new one is things are happening. And they're crazy things, and it's a really engaging movie in that respect. And it has a shitload of Tony Todd in it. And you just can't say that for the remake. I do have a lot of nice things to say about it. But...
I mean, you and I at least were generally quite positive overall on the remake. That being said,
It hasn't aged well,
it hasn't it hasn't stuck with me in any kind of meaningful way. Like I don't think it's a bad movie, but it has not withstood the brief test of time for me.
I mean, I think that one had better acting than this one. For sure.
Much better.
But this one I feel like is more interesting.
Maybe we did just watch this one. I don't know if I'll remember this movie in a week.
Gotta say, Farewell to the Flesh, maybe the best horror subtitle ever.
Oh, really? I keep forgetting what it is and trying to re-remember it. And I'm like, yeah, it's like Flesh and Sensibility, or
I mean, I feel like you could
Weathering
put
Flesh.
Farewell to the Flesh after any two. and it would sound cool.
Farewell to the Flesh just sounds like a 90s death metal album title to me.
Yeah, which is cool.
Like an incantation album, or like a Nile album or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Germs,
I
and
think
flesh,
it's
War and Flesh.
I think it's a cool subtitle. I don't think it particularly describes this movie. It's just kind of something that sounds cool.
But it's said once.
They say it a couple times in the movie because, it's set in New Orleans, so of course it's set during Mardi Gras. So there's this whole theme about, celebrating the flesh and debauchery of Mardi Gras before Lent, when, you're nourishing your spirit instead and giving up worldly pleasures, so on and so forth. So there's the last hurrah of Mardi Gras is the farewell to the flesh, before Lent. But what does that have to do with Candyman? Nothing. Well, it's just kind of a backdrop for the movie.
Yeah, I guess other than Candyman departs people from their flesh.
It's sort of.
Literally.
I mean,
he has said goodbye to his flesh because he's a thought form.
He's a mirror man now.
Well, yeah, now he's a mirror man.
He's no longer a tulpa. He's a lich now.
Yeah,
with a phylactery and everything.
I will say this movie starts really strong. They have that opening sequence where this author is giving a talk in front of a bunch of people and showing slides of these really great paintings and illustrations of the Candyman history. I really love the design of the book cover that he's selling.
It's just a reflective mirror jacket.
Yeah, which is brilliant for a Candyman book.
Yeah,
that's so good.
He does a shtick where somebody in the audience asks him if he really believes in the story, and he's like, "No, I'll show you." And so he picks up his own book and looks into it and says Candyman 5 times, and then a hook comes through the projector screen behind him, but surprise, it was just somebody who was in on it, and this is just a bit that he does.
An expensive one.
An expensive one, yeah, because it's just
screen.
tearing projector screen every time. That's why I was wondering, does he bring his own projector screen, or is that the in-house projector screen?
It's in a bookstore,
yeah,
so he's doing that stuff for 20 people.
Yeah,
it's not. Yeah, but for the movie, it's awesome.
No, he's great.
No critiques.
I like him as a character. He's a very.
He kind of looks like Paul Heyman.
He looks like Paul Heyman with a braid, with a long braid. It's a very weird look.
What I really like about his character too is he clearly comes from gentry and academia.
He's a pretentious scholarly type.
Right. Who, clearly comes from some kind of money. He carries himself with a lot of airs as he talks about his book. And that's great because it's Candyman, the original one is largely set in gentrification. And
well, no, that the remake is about the gentrification, yeah.
Right, but the
Candyman mythos is it's a low income poverty area sort of urban legend.
Yeah, it's about class struggle.
Yeah, he serves as a sin eater for these sort of really poverty-ridden communities and stuff. Anytime there's a lot of crime and murder and stuff, and so he serves as the locus for all of that, the blame for when bad things happen.
Yeah, it's I guess yeah, you're right. Gentrification is more the backdrop and one of the stronger themes of the remake, but there is that element of white society moving in, and because our protagonist in the movie
of Virginia
is
Madsen, the white upper middle class grad student who's going into the Cabrini Green neighborhood where she is definitely not from, to try to pursue this urban legend. So there's
and she's essentially co-opting this narrative, right? And that's the whole idea, is that he's a thought form, so he shifts and changes over narratives. So who controls the narrative is important in Candyman. And that's why I really like that this guy is gentry, because, or at least an academic, because once again, it's here's the like here's like a white society like voice like retelling this culturally black story. And you know, it's like how that thought form, you know, can like take vengeance on it. And I love that shit. I think it's super fucking cool, largely because it ends with lots of blood. Now, there's one aspect of that opening sequence that's not great, that does haunt us throughout the rest of the film, and it's not Candyman doing that particular haunting. It's this one fucking guy.
The specter of bad acting.
Yes.
The specter of Jay Bauman.
Hey, no, that's not fair.
He looks like Jay Bauman.
Yes,
Come
kind
on.
of.
During the talk where the guy's like showing off his book, in the back we see a guy who looks a lot like Jay Bauman from Red Letter Media. I haven't seen too much of Jay Bauman's acting, but it's got to be better than this.
Yeah.
Hence the unfairness. But like, anyway, he's watching or whatever, and he catches the guy outside. And at first we think he's just asking to have his book signed, but then he kind of harasses him a little bit, saying like, "Oh, you shouldn't be retelling this story. It's
His father was killed by Candyman years ago,
yeah, this, you know, Candyman killed my dad," and whatever. And the guy the author runs off, and he goes into a bathroom, a nice, gringy, nasty-looking bathroom that's really nicely lit. And I really like grody environments that are well lit.
It's not as cool as the bathroom in the first Candyman.
No,
Yeah.
it's not. But I appreciate that they were like trying to do another gross bathroom. Like,
Sure, I guess.
cool, you know, it's a theme.
You need somewhere. Where's a place that has a lot of mirrors? Bathroom.
Yeah, it felt like homage in a kind of a fun way. Another guy comes out. I think this is worth mentioning. That another guy comes out, and they're both mutually washing their hands. And he kind of glances over at his book, and the
dude just stands up in one of the toilet stalls and then just like comes out, but he doesn't flush the toilet,
oh yeah, that's right. I forgot
which
about
bothered me.
that. Yeah, fucked up. And the author's like, "Oh, it's my book," you know, even though the guy didn't fucking ask. And the guy leaves, and the author's in there, and sure enough, he gets hooked.
He gets Candyman.
And we get to.
And
Star
you know,
movie.
I will say though I do like that as an opening kill. It pretty much sets the blueprint for almost every single other kill in this movie, except for one. Is everybody dies the exact same way. Candyman comes up from behind them, stabs his hook through their back, and then lifts them up into the air. And the hook kind of disembowels them, and then he drops them on the ground. That's how everyone dies in this movie. And I thought that got a little bit tired.
Yeah,
It was missing some creativity.
I was sure like each one does have like unique elements to it. Like there's like the snowball historian guy.
That's the one difference.
Yeah.
That's the one
That was
different
good.
kill. That was my favorite.
That was really good because it plays with the bee motif
Yes.
too. You know, and I would agree for the most part. I think most of all of the kills are just hook kills. And I would have
the
loved to
same
see
kind of hook kill too.
more bee kills, more just weird stuff. You know, even the original Candyman had some very unexpected moments with kills and whatnot. Where this, it felt like just kind of formulaic.
Yeah, extremely formulaic. I did, you know, the one special one where our protagonist is looking for information. She goes to like a skeezy snowball salesman. Thibodeau, yes, who also turns out to know stuff about Candyman. Thibodeau. He's got a lore closet behind his snowball shop.
We should talk about the introduction of that character.
I was about to say.
Gross.
Oh yeah, she just walks up to this snowball stand, and for people who aren't from the South or New Orleans, snowballs are like snow cones. They're like fluffier than snow cones. Anyway,
He's like sucking black snow cone syrup off of this old lady.
no, the woman is sucking it off, licking it off
other
of
way around.
his arm. Yeah, it's just like the really like condensed blue syrup that has that he was like pouring over one of the snowballs that's gotten all over his arm, and this just like haggard old broad is just like licking and sucking it off of his forearm for like 2 minutes.
Dude, I think
It's a great introduction.
awesome way to
It's
like
a great
introduce a
introduction,
character.
yeah.
Yeah.
That's the thing about this movie, and like I get it, it's kind of what horror movies do to a degree, but like all of the most interesting characters are killed off very shortly after they're introduced. The professor at the beginning, Thibodeau, because he dies right after that, you know, when she goes back and he tells about the mirror or whatever, where
he takes
Candyman's
her back
phylactery
into his snow cone dungeon.
Yeah.
Through like a secret door he has.
Yeah.
He has all these weird artifacts back there, including
he's some kind of cabinet of curiosities motherfucker, you know.
Yeah.
But Candyman shows up, and is that the part, or is it in a different part where somebody scratches his face and like the bees come out of the wound? That's the
ex-husband.
The ex-husband.
Not the ex-husband, the husband.
The husband earlier.
Yeah. Donald Duck.
Oh yeah, yeah. So Thibodeau.
We'll get there.
Yeah, we're jumping all over the place. But yeah, so when Candyman shows up to kill Thibodeau, he just like opens up his coat and just like all the bees swarm out. Right? Is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and cover him with bees, and then Candyman picks him up and like throws him through the wall.
Yeah.
Head first
through the wall.
And it's almost like a Buster Keaton moment, because like the cops are on the other side, like listening in and hearing for what's going on, and suddenly head pops through.
The cut is awesome. The cut is pretty funny too, because like when he throws him, it's kind of like in slow motion almost. And you can see like the actor, and he's got like the bees, like real bees, like all over his face and crawling on him and stuff. And then when it cuts and his head comes out the window in front of the cops, it's very obviously a dummy that has like its face is like all swollen with like a bunch of bee stings and shit like that. Yeah. So he just goes from like not being stung in one frame cut to just like being like you can't even discern his facial features because he's so covered in bee stings. That was really fun. Yeah. That's like the really like fun, unique kill, and I think if there had been more creativity in all the others, it would have been nice.
I will say we were lacking a little creativity, minus that one, but I do think that all of the kills are pretty well executed.
Sure.
Yeah,
like,
sure.
Like, especially like the husband. Like that is such a good kill.
I mean, when you do the same kill so many times, you get good at it, right?
I do wish there was more of an element of surprise to them. One of my favorite moments in the first one is when Virginia Madsen wakes up in the apartment and it's just like a bloody mess. All over.
I was thinking, speaking of surprise, one of my favorite moments of the original is when Virginia Madsen is being admitted to the mental institution, and she's sitting at the desk in front of the doctor, and Tony Todd just comes flying through the window behind him. Like, yeah, both of those moments are just like really great, just like out of nowhere. What the fuck is happening here? And this movie is just, it's very predictable. Somebody goes into a room that has a lot of mirrors in it. Tony Todd shows up behind them. Stabs them,
the kills
lifts
are
them
always
up.
very telegraphed.
Yeah.
You always know that they're coming. You know, it's a moment where off-brand Virginia Madsen, our main character, is
Annie.
Like,
they say her name a million goddamn times in this movie.
Annie. She has like a serious moment, and you know, there's a very Candyman kill is coming moment where, you know, it's not surprising at all that it's happening.
Yeah.
And it's fun.
It kind of follows like the same formula of the first one. Like, you know, she summons Candyman, or she says Candyman's name 5 times, not believing it's real. He shows up, but he doesn't kill her. He starts killing people around her, and the cops think that she's the killer. It's the exact same plot of the original one. It's the exact same.
I will say, like, from a conceptual level, there's things I like about what they're trying to do. It's just not executed super well. Like, I like the idea of taking a very urban focused film and transporting it into being like a Southern Gothic, essentially.
Sure, but I change the story.
Well, and
do something with the new setting.
Even the idea of her being a descendant of the original lover of Candyman
and Candyman himself
is a cool idea. They just don't execute it very
well. Well, also, like, they treat it too literally. The whole point of Candyman, and what's cool about him as, like, a horror villain, is that as a thought form, his own nature changes as the urban legend changes, as the story changes.
Yeah.
So I think at the core, you're right that the idea of taking this very urban legend of the South Side of Chicago and supplanting it into the deep, deep South, the fucking bayou, has potential to do some really fucking cool things. But they keep the story exactly the same, except for actually Candyman was from New Orleans originally. Instead of Chicago.
That's dumb. That detail is
That's
really
a really
stupid
good
to me.
point. I feel like that's a real missed opportunity. Is like
Huge
just
missed
kind
opportunity.
of taking a folklore element and like retelling it in their own way each time.
Yeah.
Because I feel like one of the traps of being a sequel is being so focused on the mythos that the first sets up that you're not willing or able to explore, different
And
avenues.
what I love about the original too is that, like, Candyman's own origin story, like the story that people tell, it feels like the kind of urban legend that's been passed down and mutated so many times that it has all of these different details. Like, it feels so extra about this freed slave who fell in love with and who was a painter who fell in love with a white woman, and then her father gathered up a mob and they chased him and they cut off his hand, but then they also went and got some bees and smeared him in honey, so the bees then came and stung him to death, so now this scary ghost has a hook hand, but also he's covered in bees. And it's like, it doesn't feel like distilled, right? It feels like a game of telephone where all of these details have been added over the years to make it scarier, where it ends up being kind of ridiculous. And this movie just treats all of that as, yes, that is literally what happened, except it happened here in New Orleans. And it turns out that our protagonist, spoilers, is descended from Candyman and his illicit lover and their line that has passed down, and that he was born on the same plantation house where our protagonist grew up, because she comes from old Louisiana money.
To me, the biggest sin of all of that is, when it comes to the literal nature of it, is that these, like the director, writers, or whatever, they felt the need to actually show the backstory.
Yes.
And that is stupid. That is dumb. Don't do that. He's a thought form. It only really works because it's been told and told.
Yes.
You don't want to show what the, quote, real thing was.
There shouldn't be a real thing.
Right. He's an entity.
He's not. That's the point of like thought forms, right? Is that they don't. Their origin is the belief that people have in them. This movie is basically saying Candyman is a real ghost whose spirit is trapped in a mirror. And if you break the mirror, you can defeat Candyman. And that doesn't he's not a thought form anymore. He's just a literal ghost.
It's so
he's
stupid.
a lich. He has a phylactery. It's
yes.
God, that flashback scene is so bad.
Terrible.
It's so bad. There's a moment where a little kid tastes the honey from one of the honeycombs that's smeared on Candyman, and he's like, Candyman. And then they all start
and then, like, all of the adults are like,
yeah,
Candyman, Candyman, Candyman.
And it's like, it's as bad as, like, how is it just you or anyone else? I'm Solo. Han Solo. What the fuck are you doing? Like, stop. I don't need origins. Don't do that.
Also,
structurally,
it's such a weird place to put it too, because we're really all over the place with this movie. But this flashback happens at the very end.
Yeah.
It's like it's in like the last 15 minutes of the movie, And it's weird because, like, the movie starts with the author, the traveling author, telling this story that we already know from the original and having, like, doing a slideshow to, like, illustrate. So even in this movie, the story is already being told to us and we get everything we need from it. And then at the very end of the movie, Candyman is like, you need to see what really happened to me. And he, like, gives her a vision, and then it's just literally what the story is. Yeah. There's no, like, revelations of what, quote-unquote, really happened that's different from what we've already known. It's just they're literally showing us a flashback of the exact story we've already been told. And it's done really badly. And it sucks. Mm-hmm. And it's really terrible.
And in that respect, the remake, it makes the remake far more appreciable.
Yeah.
Like, I really like it's all done with, like, shadow box stuff, and I thought that was really cool.
The story is different in the remake. They change the story, importantly, and that's what I think is crucial to Candyman, is that the story has to change. The story can't stay the same, and in this, they're just doing it the same, but in New Orleans for some reason. Cannot figure out why they set this movie in New Orleans. Like, they make such a big fucking deal about it. There's just, like, constant Mardi Gras shit going on. The movie is weirdly narrated by like a radio, like, shock jock kind of guy.
I love that.
Doing just a terrible fake
King,
Cajun. No, the Kingfish. The Kingfish. And, like, it makes sense, like, the first time we hear it, because, like, the protagonist is, like, driving around and she's, like, listening to the radio, but then it's just kind of, like, unmotivated narration throughout the rest of the movie.
It's almost like a Greek chorus.
Sort of.
I'm okay with that.
You know, I think they said it in New Orleans because they wanted to hear all the bad Cajun accents.
Bro.
Hell yeah.
Because there's a lot of them.
There's not a single good Cajun accent in this movie. It's awesome. Crazy.
I love it.
I'm pretty sure, like, when we were watching the credits, I was trying to see if I could figure out where they filmed it, and it looks like there's a lot of studio stuff that they were thinking in California. I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't shoot a lick of this thing in fucking Louisiana.
Well, I mean, the Candyman mansion or plantation, it does look like the Beyond.
It does. Plantation. It does look like the house in the Beyond, but I mean, it's also just kind of like generic, rundown, like, old plantation house in the South. You know what I mean?
It looked like the house from Jumanji to me, especially because it ends up getting flooded and it's full of, like, fake vines.
Well, that's the servants' quarters in the back.
No, the main house too.
Well, the main house, it, like, has vines and stuff.
Yeah, it was abandoned
inside.
full of vines.
Yeah, the flood.
It looked like the house from Jumanji.
The flood stuff happens.
And then the other house,
servants,
the servants' house, the slave house.
Yeah, the slave barracks, slave quarters.
It was, don't need to mince, but, like, I really like that too because, like, they're going through the house. They find, like, the homeless people living in there as well. You know, they've moved in.
Yeah, what was the deal with that?
More on that in a bit. At one point they look out the window and she points out the house, and it's like a weird model, and, like, there's not even a background. The sky is just kind of gray.
Well, it's supposed to be the water. It's supposed to be set on a lake, but it's not. It doesn't read very well.
No, it did it really quickly. Like, they had to have, like, we're gonna have something together. Like, the matte painting doesn't look any good. Let's do a little model or something. Yeah, and so, like, it's not very well, like, placed, even though it is where, like, the climax of the movie is set. Yeah. We never really ever get, like, a good view of it until it's flooded at the end, which is kind of rough. But yeah, let's talk, so we can kind of lead into that previous thing. Let's talk about Donald Duck.
Okay.
Our protagonist is a school teacher, and her husband is Donald Duck. He is constantly quacking throughout the movie and squawking and speaking duck noises.
He has a lot of range with it.
He has a lot of range as a duck. The first time is when he holds her in a loving embrace and they see some people just outright fucking on a balcony next door, which I thought was kind of fun.
Mardi Gras.
Mardi Gras. And he pulls her into an embrace and he says like, "Hey, what about them?" And he looks at her and he just goes, like inquisitive, like, would you like to fornicate, like a duck, and like that it threw me off so much. Like I noticed it, I was like, what the fuck was that? Like imagine like get you a man who like squawks at you for sex, like what weird. Anyway,
well he's just squawking.
And I squawk a lot
like
myself.
his default.
Don't get me wrong, but.
His default reaction to most things in this movie before he gets killed are squawks.
Yes. So, yeah, I'm going through his whole range of squawks. Don't worry.
Okay. Excuse me.
Yes. I believe the next one is when they're visiting the house, and he sees that there are homeless people in it. At one point, he's excited, and he points at, like, I think the mirror or something in her room or whatever, and he goes, "Mah!" Like that. Like, look at this! And then there's another bit where he's running, I think in the same scene, and he stubs his toe and he goes, "Ah!"
Yeah, no, it's when he's standing at the window and he's like looking out at like the old slave quarters or whatever, and he like turns around and like takes 2 steps and then just trips over this like massive pile of rubble that is just right there. And yeah, his reaction is to quack.
There's a lot of range, and he's got and
man, I was so confused by his whole deal because I could have sworn the first couple of scenes he was in.
Officer.
No, you thought he was. Well, I mean, they introduced him at the police station because our protagonist and her mother are there because the guy at the beginning who confronted the author is her brother. And he's the number 1 suspect for he confessed to killing the guy because he feels guilty because he was the one who found their murdered father years ago. Whatever. But the husband is introduced in that scene as well. And he's wearing like a jacket with like a patch on it. So you thought he was a cop.
Yeah, or a detective or some shit.
Something. He's not. He's a chef. But Mike, he's a chef and a duck,
and maybe a cop.
My confusion was I could have sworn in the first couple of scenes we saw him in, he was doing a really bad Cajun accent. And then later, they just kind of abandon it, and he just kind of has like a normal, like American
duckish though. But yes,
I mean, yeah, he doesn't sound like
it's always in this range. And he's definitely the comic relief of the movie, very intentionally so, but in the weirdest way. I loved him, though.
Until he dies.
Yeah, I thought he was great from beginning to end. None of that's a complaint.
Yeah.
More ducks in movies, more duck-themed actors.
I mean, after hearing his terrible accent at a certain point, they were just like, okay.
Yeah, I mean,
do what you want.
Reshoot those scenes or get some ADR then. I don't know, maybe I wasn't paying attention. Maybe it was just because we're in New Orleans and we've already heard a lot of bad Cajun accents. And it's just my expectation that every character is going to have one. But I could have sworn the first couple of times he talked, he was doing an accent.
It came and went.
It doesn't matter.
They likely didn't shoot sequentially either. So my thought is just like between the days of shooting, he just kind of forgot like how heavy his accent was.
Just dropped it all together. Yeah. I mean, whatever. Like the
really comfortable on set.
The acting in this movie is like subpar at best, and like just dreary at worst.
Well, we do have one notable actor, Veronica Cartwright.
Yes,
is the mother.
That's
she
true.
Was in the '70s Body Snatchers.
Yes, right. and Alien. She's hamming it up, I suppose, an appropriate amount for this movie.
Yeah. Outside of Tony Todd, she gives probably
the most interesting performance. Yeah.
One.
Yeah, and I mean, there's the other bit part characters like the professor, or the author at the beginning. I think he's not. I don't think his performance is good, but I think it's fun. And same with Thibodeau. All the main characters, though. Veronica Cartwright's character in this movie reminded me very much of the mother in The Room, even though this movie came before that. But it's that same...
I definitely have breast cancer.
That is her character in this movie. That Veronica Cartwright's character is if the scene in the room where the mother's like, I just got the test results back and I definitely have breast cancer was extended throughout the movie.
Yeah, and much better acted.
Because the whole thing is that Veronica Cartwright has cancer, I guess, and she's dying, and she will not shut up about it.
Well, I like
Every conversation she has with her daughter is like, I'm gonna be dead soon, and I want to have a winter wedding, especially with this kind of weather. You know, just
when I'm worm food,
I'll be worm food before long. By the time you have your first child, I'll be dead. It's just like that's like the extent of her character in this movie.
I love it too, and like I buy it a little bit because like you know, growing up around a lot of like old Southern women, they loved it. They're so morbid.
Yeah,
they
it's
love
true.
talking about death. Death always comes up at, you know, at the dinner table. It always comes up.
She's
like
as an old wealthy Southern woman, like she's not an unbelievable character.
old Southern women put the gothic in Southern Gothic, man. Like they're morbid as shit. There's something to that. I do like that. Like the first thing that the mother does is just like get super morbid about her own death, but in the most blasé way. You know, she's like fully accepted it, just has no realization of like how doom and gloom she's even being. Like she's really flippant about being like, when your mother's worm food. Like,
Oh no,
I
I disagree. It seems like she's laying it on heavy for
As like
the
a guilt trip?
sympathy. As a guilt trip.
No, I'm with that.
Like, oh, your mother's gonna be dead soon. That's true. She's an interesting performance.
One thing that I wanted to hear your take on, Cleve, is all of the art in this movie, because there's a ton of illustrations and murals and paintings of various levels of quality.
Well, if you want my opinion, the art in this movie comes in various levels of quality. Yeah, dog. Some of that shit's real bad. Some of it's great.
I love the mural in the house.
Likes. That goes in the likes category. We love that, even though it's literally the exact same thing with like going into the mouth of the graffiti thing or whatever. Mm-hmm. I did really like how it was done. I think it still looked really good, even though it is literally the same thing in a new location. I thought it was very fun. She's like our protagonist is a practicing artist, and she's very bad.
She's a practicing artist for one scene where we see a painting that she's working on,
right? So it's specifically a self-portrait.
I guess she is like an art teacher.
Yeah,
at like an a low income inner city school.
And she's not very good, but you know, art teachers don't have to be. That's okay.
Also,
just as long as they're encouraging children to be art, that's all right. That's okay.
There's the part where she's having the dream sequence where she like looks in, she's like out on the balcony at her mother's place or whatever, and she looks inside and sees Candyman there, and then he kind of like fades out, and like the portrait of like his forbidden lover like fades in, like that presumably that he painted of her, and it's just like, ooh, that looks bad. It's not good.
Yeah, and that one's definitely like supposed to be good.
It should. Well, yeah. I mean, isn't like part of the whole thing is that he's like a great painter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's presented epically. Like it's a very large portrait.
Oh yeah, it's
quite tall.
Yeah, and it's like a full size like.
And it's got the whole Victorian framing, and the camera's low on it to make it feel even more like dramatic and powerful. And then it's just a dog shit portrait.
Looks bad.
It's not very good.
There's all the kids' art when she goes to his dad's house.
I like
after
the kids'
he's gone
art.
missing. Yeah, all that stuff is.
The kids' art is cool because they're kids. So, like, the expectation isn't very high, like, for the quality of it, but, like, the illustrations are still, like, pretty chilling. And it's at a nice level because normally, like, what horror movies do with that trope, like, I'm sure if you haven't seen the film, you're probably picturing, like, crayon drawings right now. It's not like that at all.
He's like a middle school or, like, freshman in high school age.
Like
so,
you know, and he's doing, like, art that's, like, pretty good for a preteen, but,
like charcoal drawings and stuff.
Pencil, it's all, like, monochromatic, and, you know, the anatomy's not right, but that's also kind of unsettling. And it works. Like, I really like those pieces.
And he's got some kind of, like, expressionistic ones, too, in that closet.
Yeah. Oh, honestly, there was one in the background that we don't get a good enough shot of, that, like, where, like, it's, like, a big face and it's kind of melty, that looked fucking sick, if I'm being real. Like, his stuff was pretty cool. Yeah, there's a little bit with, like, painting, like, Mardi Gras floats and stuff, but I wish there'd been more of that as someone, like, who actually had that for a job for a while, like, painting Mardi Gras floats. I think that there's a lot of fun stuff you can do with that, but there is, like, a little bit where you see some, like, Candyman-esque float motifs, but there could have been more. It would have been neat to see.
For a Mardi Gras centric movie, they didn't do like a ton with floats.
There's
like
2 floats in the movie.
there are a lot of like foot processions, like parades and stuff, like people in weird costumes and stuff.
Mardi
which
Gras does have a shitload of that.
Yeah, there's plenty of that in Mardi Gras, but yeah, I mean, I think it's just a budget thing. They didn't want to put together like entire floats just for like background shots in this movie, you know. So like, I get it.
I mean,
but
it's true. And then those floats are made pretty cheap. I think I made like $70 doing like a lot of floats. Like it does not pay very well.
You were also a kid.
Yeah,
You don't pay kids well for any odd jobs.
Yeah, I was like 18, 19 at the time.
Yeah, kid.
Yeah, but like it's and in the South.
When I was 19, I was making $8 an hour.
Yeah.
Like, kids don't make much money. But
yeah, but it was that I'm really glad I did that though. It's a fun memory. It's done with like air compressor like sprayers, so you gotta hook them up to like the
like what they paint cars with.
Yeah, and it's really gratifying. Like doing like
those
the
big
coats
spray
and
guns,
passes, and then you go back for detail stuff, and it'd be fun to do it again at some point. But yeah.
Gotta move back to somewhere that does Mardi Gras.
Yeah, not around here. North
Not
Carolina
around
doesn't really
here.
do it, but
I mean,
on the Gulf Coast.
Literally nowhere does it except where we grew up,
Yeah.
and Louisiana. That's literally it.
Because fun fact for listeners, Mardi Gras did not originate in New Orleans. It originated in the States at least. Originated in Mobile, Alabama. Which is loosely where we're from. Across the bay, so
most people do not know that.
Yeah. I mean,
it's because
it's better in New Orleans.
It's way bigger and better and cooler and more fun.
But it did start when we grew up, which is cool.
Yeah.
And then there's Carnival. And fucking neat though. I think as holidays go, Mardi Gras is like pretty.
Mardi Gras is dank.
Pretty up there.
That's one of the things I miss most from
Same.
home is going to the Mardi Gras parades, catching a bunch of beads, moon pies. I mean, these days you can buy moon pies pretty much anywhere. But yeah, we marched in the Mardi Gras parades in the high school band, which was fun.
Yeah, did a number of floats as well. Throwing out beads.
Yeah, I never rode on any of the floats.
Really? It was fun.
Never had an opportunity.
And then there's the big Mardi Gras balls, which I've never been to, but that's a bucket
I've
list
never
thing
been
for
to
me. I
those
want to go
either.
to one of those at some point.
I feel like
it's like a masquerade kind of thing.
Yeah,
it's got some.
You
gotta
do something like
the little
eyes wide shut.
Yeah,
type of Fidelio.
Yes,
a little bit
secret society kind of bullshit.
That sounds fun to me. Like I would, at least I know how to say no to people. Like, come on, I could have a fun time.
Veiled prophet kind of shit.
Yeah, let's go, dude.
I lost my train of thought. Oh, yes, we were talking about performances. I will say we were arguing a little bit about this while we were watching the movie, but I stand by it. I don't think Tony Todd's performance in this movie is up to par with his performance in the original. I still think he's the best. I still think he's the best performance in the movie.
Yes.
But and this is not to rag on him at all, but I very much felt like he was sleepwalking through this movie. And I don't blame him. It's not a good movie. It's not a good script. It's very much a paycheck movie for everyone involved. So, like, I would have probably done the same thing in his position, but I just think his performance in this is very low energy, very sleepy. And, like, he's not, like, a bombastic kind of character in the original, but he does carry himself in such a way that he's like very quietly sinister, like he could explode with violence at any moment. And in this I just didn't get that from him.
I would agree that his performance definitely isn't as strong as the first one.
Of course.
I think I would chalk up a good amount of that to direction.
Sure.
I think the way he's presented in this film is not as strong as the original by any means.
Totally.
They show
in
him,
every single way.
They show him much more in this movie.
Well, yeah,
but
we've seen him.
That takes out the mystique of, him appearing and being unexpected like the original. And because we see more of him, again, that mystique is gone. So we're just left with him kind of standing there. And, you know, there's so much quiet depth in the original to his character because he is a very menacing, scary figure, but he's also tragic. And there's an element of lost love even in his character in the original.
Totally. I don't feel any of that come through in this. I don't feel
it's much
any
more
of that.
a one-dimensional character. And because of that, I feel like he gives a very similar performance, but because of the direction, it doesn't imply as much as
because I want to say like I wouldn't use the word like it is subdued, but I wouldn't go as far as to say like phoning it in, for instance, because like I was noticing, like, again, you can fake this with eye drops or whatever, but like his eyes watering in scenes, and I really liked his body language in this film too. There's a lot of moments where like he kind of like the way he like stretches his arms out to show like his power and control over people was really cool. Like and to, like, you know, like, again, like Candyman's whole deal, you know, you've already kind of said it, but like Candyman's whole deal is control and power, and he's this thing beyond time. So he doesn't need to be bombastic or rage induced, but he has this total power, and he can crash through a window at any moment or do anything like that, and he can be anywhere. And his voice is there for sure.
The voice is great.
The voice is great.
Always.
But, I liked all of that stuff. I just feel like the shots weren't, like, upward angled enough. Like, the cinematography and the lighting wasn't doing much to really bring him out of the shadows and make him this creature, this being. And we also just see him so much, and he's also used, you know, mechanically. He's essentially just a Jason Voorhees in this movie that speaks, or a Freddy Krueger, and that's gonna really hamper, like, you know, like how that's taken in for sure.
I mean, even the way
I was just happy to get more Tony Todd.
Yeah.
Like, in
I
any,
mean,
any
Tony
capacity,
Todd is great. Like, I'm always happy to see him.
Yeah.
But I feel like I watched a different movie than you did, because I didn't get any of the subtlety in his acting that you just described. I get it very much in the first one, but like every scene he's in this is just like deadpan kind of face. Like, I just didn't feel any sort of like charisma or anything from his eyes. It's just like,
Really?
Yeah, it just.
I would recommend revisiting this, because like you can see his eyes watering and like, his eyes.
I mean, I was watching the movie at the same time, and I was paying attention. Like, I don't feel like I need to revisit it. I just don't.
Yeah. Well, again, like, I think a lot of it is just direction. Like, look at the scene in the original where he appears in the parking garage.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's
great scene.
It's such a simple scene. He's really not doing much. He appears and he slowly walks towards
But
it.
he's so threatening in that scene.
Exactly, because there's such a confidence in how it's directed, and there's such a menace in the way it's shot, because he's, you know, it's shot very wide at first, you know.
His physicality is present. He's a very tall guy.
Yeah, and it emphasizes that. Where, like, this movie, I really don't feel like it ever emphasizes his height very much.
There's some, like, two shots with him and Annie where, like, you really get that good perspective, because he is, like, much taller than her. Mm-hmm. But I agree that outside of that, not so much. A little bit, too, like, when he kills the husband, and he's, like, we really get that long, slow part of him, like, lifting him up in the air as the hook kind of, like, slowly disembowels him. Like that, you get some of that same kind of threatening physicality. I mean, direction, I think, is definitely a big part of it. Like, it's this director is certainly a lesser director than Bernard Rose is.
Yeah, and I mean, like, think of the scene in this one where he's walking through the crowd towards Annie. You know, it doesn't feel like he's just walking straight through. It feels like he's almost shuffling through the crowd.
The crowd should be parting around him.
Yes.
He shouldn't be having to pick his way through the crowd.
Exactly.
That's actually a really good example of like doing that the wrong way. Mm-hmm. It's like, even if the rest of the crowd can't see him, they should be like subconsciously moving around him, even if they're not realizing it, you know, because he is a force. He is an energy that's there. But yeah, him sort of like shuffling like in between like all of these people sort of coming towards her. It's like
It doesn't work.
That's not menacing. That's not scary. You know, that's just somebody trying to work their way through a crowd, you know. Like he gets to emote a little bit in the flashback scene where like they cut his hand off and whatnot, but
Yeah, I will say
that
like,
whole scene is just so bad.
the rest of the scene is really bad, but Tony Todd does give a pretty good.
Sure, I mean he's
you know,
he's putting something into it. It's just it's hard to appreciate it in such
surrounded by
such
all
a
the other
terribly executed
doo-doo.
thing. The CG swarm of bees in
yeah.
that scene that comes
Completely unnecessary.
out of the blue like a fucking cloud. That just they just we see somebody from I don't know where they pull it from. Somebody pulls like two very clean, nice looking honeycombs like out of their ass or something, and everybody kind of like smears honey on him, and then just like off in the distance, just like this enormous black cloud of CGI bees just comes out of nowhere, lands all over him, stings him up to death, and then just up and flies off into the distance again. And it's so bad.
Yeah, it's rough.
It's like it's just someone who is very literal and doesn't understand how bees work.
It's so bad. Yeah, it's so fucking terrible. And then his lover runs up. I like it when she runs up. She's like, no, don't get off of me. Let me through. And like nobody's touching her. And she gets up and I don't know why she has her mirror there. Doesn't make any sense. She's got this fucking occult ass looking mirror that's like a bunch of snakes
Well,
and
it's
shit.
ass looking, but also like definitely plastic.
Oh yeah, well I mean it's a cheap prop, but
Like
also
red jewel eyes.
it's a cheap prop, but also like its design just feels like very out of place
It looks
for
like something you'd find like a medieval fantasy film.
right for like this Victorian era like Southern Louisiana belle to have. Like it's totally like it doesn't make any sense. I don't know why she has it in that scene, but as he's dying, it captures his spirit in the mirror. And I guess that mirror has been out in the slave quarters behind the house all of these years with a bunch of skeletons for some reason.
Yeah,
That doesn't
And the
really make
roof is-
sense.
yeah, it's a load-bearing mirror too.
Oh yeah.
Because the second it's pulled out from where it's sitting,
The whole place like starts to collapse.
I also like that.
That's what happens when you touch the phylactery.
Yeah, like they do the bit where our protagonist is going through the building and it's dark and a vine hits her shoulder or whatever, and she pulls back the vine, and it's not a vine, it's a hand.
It's a skeleton.
It's a skeleton hand, and she throws the skeleton hand on the ground, and it's just skeleton bits, but the whole arm and hand is still like together, like a medical skeleton would
Yes,
be.
like wired
It's, like,
together.
Wired together.
Yeah.
Like it's so
It's so
fucking
funny.
corny. It's kind of great though, and then she pulls out the she pulls out the mirror, and the whole wall collapses. Yeah, when you shouted like we were watching the movies, you shouted, Ben, like that's a load bearing mirror. It was very funny. And then we get the whole flashback in that sequence. It's all just like that house interior again. Like I said, it's very Jumanji, and it's super corny. But like at least like even OG Jumanji is like tongue in cheek. You know, like this is just it's kind of trying to be serious. It doesn't really. know what it is.
No, it's absolutely like playing it very straight, you know, very seriously.
And she breaks the mirror, and Tony Todd breaks like a mirror himself in just terrible. With
the
just
worst CG I've seen
in a long time.
a while.
So,
Yeah.
Well,
this is 1995, like low to mid budget horror movie CG. So like, yeah, it's fucking bad. And the way they drag that out too, like
they're really
you really
proud of it.
like you feel like for the time, like they thought it was really good, and maybe it was.
It's so funny though.
If I was a child, I would've thought it was really
I'm
cool.
honestly glad that they dragged it out because I found it fucking hilarious.
Same.
I found it so funny.
Because yeah, he starts like cracking like a mirror, and then like chunks of him fall off, and then eventually he just shatters into a million pieces, and it looks like one of those like particle dissolve effects that you would see in something like the music video for I'm Blue by Eiffel 65.
It's also so fucking confused.
Dabba dee dabba die.
Yeah, because like it's so confused because he's already like full of a weird thing. Like he's a hollow man full of bees. And he kind of is the bees also. There's like the resonating aspect of it.
Yeah.
Like there's a little bit of him everywhere. You know, like a bee is just a small part of a hive. This small story is just a part of a greater, darker entity.
Yes, it's one of the coolest things about him, that he's just a hollow man full of bees.
It is the coolest thing. Yeah,
it's
like no doubt.
sick.
And it always looks cool. It always whatever. And like this movie does some great shots with it.
A couple.
Yeah, and we'll circle back. But like here. At the end, it's like, oh, but also he's a mirror, and then they have to like do that as well.
Well, yeah, because his soul is trapped in the mirror. So if you break the mirror, then his soul has to shatter too, right?
Just losing the plot.
Yeah,
literally,
it should have shattered into bees.
Should have.
Yeah.
That could have been neat.
Yeah.
Or terribly more CG bees.
You know, with him, being portrayed by bees, one of my favorite sequences in the movie is after Annie says Candyman in the mirror 5 times at the school. We have this very quiet moment where one of her students looks out the window and there's a little bee.
Just one bee kind of like bumping into the
window, and then it kind of like falls and like dies. And it's such a quiet moment, and I found it awesome. It was an incredible scene, and I feel like we don't really get many subtle moments like that in the rest of the movie, and it's just a bummer, because like I feel like that is really intelligently done. It feels like it would have been from the first one. Yeah,
well, I mean, the first Candyman is full of subtlety, full of subtle moments, and like that's what's cool about him as a monster. He's a subtle villain, right? Except when he's not. And that's what's scary about him too, right? Like he is sort of insidious and subtle and sinister, and can just sort of appear out of nowhere. But also, he can just crash through a fucking window out of nowhere, right?
Powerful.
Yeah, it's great, and yeah, this movie doesn't do enough with that.
What it does do. Yeah, it does have some really good bee-related effects. I really do like that bit where his face...
Where she scratches his face.
Yeah, and the bees pour out. Like, that looks really good. You can tell, like, they cut back to it twice, and, like, the second time it does, you can tell it's like a latex face. We get a little bit too much of the side of it.
Yeah, it's a head, a prosthetic head.
But in the first shot, like I couldn't tell. Like it really looked good. It looked like bees were crawling out of his flesh. And
it's kind of goofy when the bees like crawl back inside and it just kind of back together.
Yeah, but I'll say I got to give it to the makeup artists in this movie. Like a lot of those like kill practicals were great to look at. Again, sometimes a lot of the same stuff. Oh, and it's super worth noting that. What's her name? The mother.
Veronica Cartwright.
Yeah, Veronica Cartwright's character. She does get the privilege of dying twice in the movie. The first time it's
in a dream sequence,
dream. And she gets ripped in half, and then...
Well, no, he slits her throat.
He slits her throat
with the hook.
And then, and then later on she gets ripped.
And then later on he does the same generic Candyman kill where he stabs her from behind with the hook.
Yeah. I do love the sequence where Candyman opens his trench coat and we get all the bees on him.
More of that. Yeah. There's too little of that in this movie. They had their bee budget was clearly much smaller. I wonder if it's because Tony Todd had the same thing in his contract as he did in the original, where he would get an extra $1,000 for every time he was stung by a bee. I wonder if he went into this movie with that in his contract, so they're like, we're gonna minimize the bees. We don't have $37,000 to give Tony Todd. I think that's how much like bonus money he got from the original one, because he got stung like 30 something times. But so they just decided to way tone down the bees, which is kind of a shame. The last thing that I want to talk about, and then I think we've hit pretty much everything. The music, Philip Glass returns, and the score in this movie is fantastic. Far and away the best thing about the movie, to I found, jarring degree. There were times where I'm like, oh my god, the music right now is so good, and it does not match the garbage that's on screen.
That's the thing, like, I almost feel like it's a great composition, or, you know, series of compositions and score that doesn't fit the movie very well.
It's way too good
like,
for the movie.
I feel like it fit the original so well because the original is very slow and methodical in the way it presents itself. And so a Philip Glass minimalist score works so well with that kind of classical compositions and stuff like that, where this feels more like a typical slasher at times. And like having that paired with very, you know, deliberate minimalist stuff, you know, it doesn't work.
It reuses a lot of the themes from the original, like the Candyman theme, so on and so forth. But yeah, the score is way too good for this movie. Kind of crazy that they got Philip Glass back to do it. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he just had like a bunch of extra music from the original lying around. It was like, yeah, you want to pay me again? I'd send you some stuff that I already got, you know?
Do you think Philip Glass also had a bee sting contract? I think I'm going to start working that into all my work contracts now.
It's like if I get stung by a bee...
Remote work doesn't matter, but if I get stung by a bee, $50.
Yep, $50 for every time I get stung by a bee. Mm-hmm. I bet you could get it in some contracts, be like, you're not going to get stung by any bees.
Yeah.
We'll see about that. Are y'all ready to rate this?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Ben, well, this was your pick, so you get to do the honors.
Sure, yeah. You know, I picked this one because it was one of the few on the list that didn't look absolutely terrible and I hadn't seen.
We dodged some bullets.
And, you know, ultimately, it wasn't terrible. It wasn't good, but it wasn't terrible. You know, I don't think it's terribly memorable, but, you know, it does some things right. I will give it that. I think it kind of blows its load in the first opening, you know, sequence.
In the first 5 minutes of the movie.
But, you know, ultimately, Tony Todd is good. There's good elements. Great score. I'm going to give it a 2.5 out of 5.
Cleveland.
3's fine.
Wow, all the way up to 3.
Yeah. Just because, you know, really, for Tony Todd and Philip Glass, and the movie had a lot of kills.
Had a lot of the same kill over and over again.
I still liked them. Maybe 2.5 is a little more favorable or accurate, but fuck it.
All right.
3.
It's gonna be a 2 for me. I thought this movie was pretty bad. Had some interesting things, but again, I was not super impressed by even Tony Todd's performance in this. Score, fantastic. Couple of really interesting little side characters. Handful of good practical effects, but overall pretty by the numbers slasher, which is not what I look for Candyman. I want a lot more creativity and sort of interesting ideas, and I just didn't have it. So yeah, 2 out of 5. But that will give Candyman Farewell. I almost said the new Flash, but Candyman Farewell to the Flesh, an average of 2.5 out of 5.
You know, they cut off his arm. They really could have called it Candyman Farewell to Arms.
Hey. They could have.
Or, you know, also there's the flood. They could have called it Candyman Watership Down, or Candyman,
Watership Down.
Sense and Sensibility.
Candyman Das Boot.
Yeah.
Do we have a box office from Bones and All last week?
Yeah, we do. I almost forgot about that. Okay, so opening weekend, Bones and All. Oh, no way. No. 1 second. Sorry, this has got to be wrong. It says opening weekend was $200,000.
No way.
No, it must have had a limited opening. So I'm gonna go with.
No, it was like heavily advertised.
I'm gonna go with the international one, which is 2.1 million.
Even still,
that's still so low.
Yeah, which is sad.
I mean, I guess it is kind of like an art house movie, sort of. Like, Luca Guadagnino's sort of an art house director, but even so.
Yeah.
Domestically, $200,000?
Opening weekend.
What was it?
I'm guessing it had a limited release at first.
Yeah.
I was getting so many
expanded.
ads for
What
it.
were our predictions for that?
So, for our predictions, let's see. I predicted 18. Cleve, you predicted 40. And TC predicted 35.
Well, you win just by being the lowest. Jesus Christ.
Sad.
That's insane. If those numbers are right, that is tragic.
Go see Bones and All.
Go see Bones
Yeah,
and All.
seriously.
Christ. Like, go support that movie, then.
Give
Good
that some
Lord.
money. I don't think it was a super high budget movie, but geez, like that 2.1 million internationally, that ain't enough to recoup probably. Anyway, well, next week is actually our final film review of the year because end of year stuff comes after that. But our final film of the year is a Patreon pick. And this final Patreon pick of 2022 comes courtesy of honorary podboy Sam Simon. And it is another sequel, but it's not the second one. It's another sequel to another movie we watched earlier this year. We're doing Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors, which is a fun one.
Yeah, I'm excited about
I'm
this
looking
one.
forward to
It's
this one,
been a
yeah.
long time since I've seen it. I remember enjoying it.
You were talking about an amazing subtitle. The Dream Warriors is very
Yeah. When we talked about the second one earlier this year, I had only seen that and the original and final or New Nightmare. But since then, I've seen all of them. So now I'm coming into this one with the full breadth of knowledge of Nightmare on Elm Street.
Have you read the fanfics?
Yeah, I've read all the fanfics.
Wow.
I've written my fair share, too. Ones where Freddy Krueger impregnates Sonic. Check that one out.
In dreams, anything is possible.
Exactly. So, next week we'll be going into 2023 with Nightmare on Elm Street 3. Kind of appropriate, I think.
Yeah.
All right, sponsor time.
Sponsor time. The shelf speaks. Do we dare listen?
The shelf beaks.
Oh. Well, it turns out we don't have a choice. How does this happen? So, as you know, the sponsor shelf gives us these at random.
Right.
It selects them for us, and
We don't know what
choice
these sponsors are ahead of time.
but to read the sponsor. And I cannot believe what the sponsor shelf, in all of its, chaotic glory, has given me.
Who's the
this
sponsor
week.
this week, Cleve?
I'm going to show you who the sponsor is.
Oh, I
this
already
week.
know. As soon as I saw your face, I already knew.
The sponsor this week is a single piece of paper with the word Tulpa written on it. God damn it.
It's perfect for the Candyman
So good.
episode. It's perfect. Returning sponsor. I think this is maybe our only returning sponsor that we've ever had on the show. Tulpa is sponsoring the show
How
yet
did this
again.
happen? Do these all say Tulpa on them? What is going
I don't
on?
know.
I pulled this randomly from the thing. Oh my god.
Yeah.
I'm fucking serious. I don't know how that happens. Anyway, yeah, it's
It's Tulpa.
just
Tulpa.
yep, from another movie that did a terrible job of representing tulpas.
Wrong.
Uh,
Incorrect. But that's okay.
Candyman.
Thank you
Candyman.
for sponsoring the show yet again, Tulpa.
Tulpa. A piece of paper with the word Tulpa and nothing else written on it.
All right. Well, that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode. Please leave us a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. You can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/podpeoplepod. Shout out to honorary pod boys, Sam Simon and Zach Confer. Y'all are the best. We love and appreciate you, especially going into this new year coming up pretty soon. We are still on Twitter at podpeoplepod and at letterbox.com.
For now.
For now, I'm at the point where I don't think Twitter's going anywhere. But we are still on Twitter at podpeoplepod and at letterbox.com/podpeoplepod. which is where you can find a list of all the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and links to those episodes. You can still find me tweeting into the void on Twitter at SomeSpookySnake and twitch.tv/SomeSpookySnake for monthly Spooky Saturday streams. I'm playing Outlast 2.
Well, yeah, you can continue reading my tweets at Mr. Sheets until the whole thing burns down. So,
and then you're still on Hive.
Yes,
with
at
the bees at Sheets, like the convenience store.
But not, because he got there first.
Yeah.
Which is good. I do love that.
Clever.
Yeah, and you can find any amount of my work on dreadxp.com amongst all of the super cool games that that super cool publisher is producing. I am working on many of them, or have worked on many of them, and trying to narrow it down now. I've got a few tasks out of the way on some of the other titles, but mostly on Creepshow these days. So you can find my work on ArtStation also, I guess, but I haven't posted there in like 2 years at this point. But there's some cool paintings there, you know. Go play Mirror Forge. We just released that one. And I did some work on that. I did some a little bit of UI, a little bit of creature design, the maps you find in that world. I did those in Mirror Forge. That's kind of neat.
Yeah.
Go
play it. It's on Steam. I'm guessing.
It's kind of like Silent Hill. And it's kind of like Stranger Things, and it's got some spookies in it for sure.
And it's on Steam.
It's on Steam.
Cool. Check it out. All right. Thanks for listening. Join us again next week. Until then, we're slipping back into the swamp. Into the swamp.
You get a line and I'll get a pole, honey. You get a line and I'll get a pole, babe. You get a line and I'll get a pole. We'll go down to the crawdad hole, honey. Baby mine. Yonder comes a man with a sack on his back, honey. Yonder comes a man with a sack on his back, babe. Yonder comes a man with a sack on his back. Got all the crawdads he can pack, honey. Baby mine. He fell down and he busted that sack, honey. He fell down and he busted that sack, babe. He fell down and he busted that sack. Y'all seen the crawdads back and back, honey. Baby mine. You get a line and I'll get a pole.